Hi everybody, I have a really simple tip for you today. It's not really even a recipe, and I can't believe I haven't done this one before, but I'm going to show you how to cook a spaghetti squash in your Instant Pot. It's one of the things that the Instant Pot is great for because this guy is awesome. He's a nice low carb, grain-free way to get something like a pasta. It tastes good. To most people, my children particularly, do not like spaghetti squash. But I love it, my husband loves it, and so we use it sometimes. But they're really hard to chop and to get to the strings, cook them in the oven. It takes a while. I don't like to use the microwave a whole lot, so Instant Pot to the rescue. So I simply washed my spaghetti squash. This one, I just have one, but sometimes they're really skinny and you can fit two in. But I only have one today. I only needed one. So we just put our squash in whole. Like I said, I washed it. If it had any labels, I would have peeled those off. Half a cup of water goes in. Make sure my gasket's in there. And I set my lid on. And I'm going to cook for 10 minutes on high pressure. That's the first step. And then there will be another step, which I'll show you in just a minute. So I want manual and 10 minutes. And we'll let it go, and I'll see you back here in a few minutes. Okay, so our squash cooked for 10 minutes, and because there's so little liquid in there, it comes up to pressure super fast and comes down also very fast. So this is not a long process. You could let it completely depressurize on its own if you wanted to do that. Okay, so really the only tricky part about this is getting the squash out. So I sometimes use a towel or just use my hot pads and reach in there and grab it, and just know that those are going to be wet and you need to let them dry before you try to use them to pick up something hot, like a hot pan out of your oven. So since we've cooked it, it's going to cut super easily. It's always going to be a little bit hard to cut through the root, but it's near impossible when it's raw. So this is much easier. And again, you need some way to hold on to it. And then you just scrape out this inside fleshy part with all the seeds. If you don't get all of that out, it's really not a big deal, but I prefer to get it out at this stage. Okay. Back in it goes. I just use a spoon. Actually, sometimes I'll use a grapefruit spoon because they're serrated. But we have these old spoons that were my grandmother's, and they're pretty thin, so they work fairly well. Back in, it doesn't really matter how they go in there as long as they're in there. There's still that same liquid in there from before. So put the lid back on, turn it back to sealing, and this time we only need 5 minutes. So you have to turn it off. Back on. 5. There we go. So I'll see you again in about 5 minutes. Okay, and we're all done. And I'm sorry I didn't turn the camera back on, but I should have showed you how fast the pressure comes down. I just turned it to venting, and it took like 5 seconds. There's just so little liquid in there. It's a very fast process. So again, this is the tricky part, really getting it out. Now that it's slit in half, I can use my tongs. One of the problems with using vegetables in place of pasta or rice, what would typically be a starch, is that vegetables contain a lot of water, and so they're going to bring a lot of water to the party. So you have to deal with that in some way. This one actually is not seeming like it's cooked, which is really weird. It's very, there it goes. Like parts of it are super, almost mushy. And parts of it are hard, like they're not cooked. This is strange, y'all. I just want to show you. It's coming apart from the skin very easily. but it's not shredding like normal. I'm going to put that one to the side and see if the other one's better. I've never had that happen before, but I wanted to show you in case the same thing happens to you. See what this side is like. That's a little bit more of that inner membrane kind of stuff. It should just very easily come apart. I think it's not done. We'll try. I've never had one not be done in this amount of time, but there's a first time for everything, so I don't want to fight with it. Let me move it back to sealing, and we'll do 5 more minutes and see if that comes out better. Yeah, it's definitely hard. But I want to tell you what I'm doing with this tonight. I'm actually making a baked spaghetti, which is essentially like lasagna. And I have made the cheese filling. So this is not paleo. This will be primal or keto. So all of you doing the keto diet, the ketogenic diet, this will be great for that. So I have a 16-ounce container of ricotta cheese, an 8-ounce block of mozzarella, which I've reserved out a little bit for the top. I shredded a half a cup of Parmesan, 3 eggs, a teaspoon of garlic salt, and a half a teaspoon of fresh ground pepper. And so that is my cheese layer, like if it were a lasagna. But the way to deal, I was talking about the water and the vegetables, the way to deal with that, in my opinion, so that it comes out really palatable, is to mix your squash with like a custard, something with eggs, and then it bakes up almost like a quiche texture. If you just use your spaghetti squash strings as noodles, you put those on your plate, no matter how hard you work, you're going to have a puddle of water. And it just, to me, there's something about that eating experience that isn't as pleasurable. So if you use your spaghetti squash in a casserole, it works great. And I actually have a breakfast casserole recipe on my website. It has sausage and eggs. It's really good, and you're getting the vegetable instead of like a bread. You know, those typical breakfast casseroles that have bread, sausage, eggs, cheese, that kind of thing. And actually it's really good without the cheese, that one, because there's so much flavor from the sausage and other ingredients in there. Anyway, so this is what we're doing tonight. I'll show it to you when I put it together. But this is really all about cooking the spaghetti squash. So just know if something happens like what happened with mine, it wasn't done. So just pop it back in there, and again, with so little liquid, it comes up to pressure super fast and comes down super fast. So it's not really taking a whole bunch of time. In this pan, I have some of my paleo spaghetti sauce. That recipe's on the web, and I've actually done a video too if you want to see how I make it. It has a lot of veggies in it. If you are following autoimmune protocol and you can't eat the tomatoes, I have a no tomato sauce recipe on my website. It's very good, if I do say so myself. Sometimes I need to slip back into that autoimmune diet for a while, and then I'll make that, and we all enjoy it. So I had some of my regular paleo sauce frozen. So I defrosted that container, and I added a cup of homemade chicken bone broth for just some extra flavor and a little bit more sauce. So I'm going to make a layer of my sauce. I'm going to end up putting my squash in my cheese and egg layer, and then I'll layer the cheese with the spaghetti squash, then a little more sauce. I'll just keep going like that. It'll end up kind of getting mixed together, but it'll be pretty going in the oven with the layers, and we'll top it with a little cheese and bake that for a while. Okay, I'll see you again in a few minutes with the squash. Okay, so let me show you letting the pressure down. Really fast, less than a minute. Okay, let's see if this guy pulls apart a little bit better now. It's really not. I think this is just a tough squash. That's very frustrating. I wanted you to get to see the nice long spaghetti-like strings if you've never worked with a spaghetti squash before. Well, you're just going to have to trust me on this, that normally it would come apart in nice long strings. You can see a little bit of that here. And there's a lot of steam. It does come out of its shell super easily, which is really nice. Again, just let as much water drain out in there as you can. You can see what it's doing here. Making these little strands. Usually you can just kind of go all the way around, over and over and over, until you get all the spaghetti loose from the shell. It's not an issue of being undercooked. It's definitely cooked. Look at that. That's super nice. So I'm just going to work with it like this. Kind of shred it apart. And I need to let this cool a little bit before I can add it to my cheese mixture because there are raw eggs in there. So we'll let this cool off a teeny bit and then I'll be able to mix it together. And also get this totally shredded. So there's a lot of vitamin A, vitamin C, fiber in the spaghetti squash. It is naturally sweet, so if you are trying to cut back on your sugar, you will probably really notice how sweet this is. Most vegetables actually have a lot of sweetness to them that we just don't notice because we're so busy getting so much artificial sweetener in our lives. And I don't mean like, you know, Splenda, I just mean we're eating a lot of added sugar for the most part. So we're not, our taste buds aren't as in tune to the natural sweetness in veggies. I hope you can see those noodles there. I'm sorry that just didn't work exactly right, but you know what? Sometimes it's really good to show when things don't go exactly according to plan. And I'm actually going to scoop this into my strainer. Are we done with it? I could use one that's just a teeny bit bigger than that. You saw the water pouring out of there? That's just so I don't unnecessarily add extra liquid to my dish. Just kind of stir that around. With it packed in here, it won't cool off as fast, but I do want it to drain some. Okay, and that's it. That's spaghetti squash in the Instant Pot, 10 minutes whole. Then you cut it, take the seeds out, put it back in for 5 minutes, or maybe 10. If you have a really big squash, it might take the 10 minutes, but certainly no more than that. And then you just, it will peel right out of the skin. You can shred it up and enjoy your spaghetti squash however you want to. Thanks, everybody.